Hello, and thanks for joining us here again on NCI Live. I'm your host, David Groth, and I'm a technical solutions specialist here at Network Center in Fargo, North Dakota. Today, we're going to be talking about a little more technical topic and specifically some hardware. We're going to be talking about Cisco's switches with Meraki management. Kind of a new topic. It's kind of exciting. Joining me today is Daniel Stewart, who's a senior business transformation solutions engineer for Cisco at Ingram, and also Chris Horvath, virtual sales specialist for Meraki, covering North Dakota and Minnesota. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Wanted to remind everybody that we are, in fact, live. So if you have questions for us about any of our topics or what have you, go ahead and chat us to us. We're live on both LinkedIn and YouTube. So please chat them to us, and we'll do our best to answer those questions live and on the air. So thanks very much. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we're talking about Cisco switching, and I think as a lot of people may or may not agree, but I think it's a generally held thing that Cisco is really the 500-pound gorilla when it comes to switching. But then we also have the Meraki product line, and Meraki. I'm just gonna pick on each one of you specifically. So, Chris, specifically, what would you say differentiates Meraki from Cisco? Because Meraki it's a Cisco product. So what would differentiate the two? Can you just give an overview for those people who aren't familiar?
Yeah, of course. So while Meraki was purchased by Cisco back in 2012, we've operated pretty much independent of one another, right? Just a division within Cisco. The difference being is that cloud managed architecture that Meraki supports within the context of switching specifically, it delivers a true zero touch configuration model, which is beneficial for our company or for our customers, those that are scaling and trying to reduce operational costs. That cloud managed dashboard is really the differentiator.
Mm-hmm. And Daniel, how would you characterize the Meraki switching and what you've seen?
Yeah, from a Meraki standpoint, comparing to Cisco, it's really all about that configuration and what you want to get out of your environment. Meraki's very much built into cloud-centric dashboards, and the dashboard is really their single source of truth in what you can do with the product. Cisco is built for over 30 years, and like you said, they're large in the industry, and many of the engineers that are trained with the Cisco class product are familiar to command line interfaces, right? You're familiar with maybe a little bit of the GUI on the dashboard, but
show run. Enable.
Show run, yeah, write mem, like you got to know how to get in there and do what you got to do at a very, product by product basis, right? You have to rely on a secondary purchase from Cisco, hopefully, to bring a orchestrator or manager into that type of environment to manage your switches and wireless at scale to gain that visibility. Meraki says, hey, you buy our solution, that dashboard is just native to your experience. And that's where a lot of that cloud first adoption and the love of Meraki really comes from is, what you see is what you get.
Yeah. So if I were to take my own personal spin on it, my experience with Meraki, you can kind of position them as that Meraki and Cisco both have they're both very powerful networking companies, but Meraki has an ease of use that Cisco does not have. And Cisco has more feature sets and more what we call enterprise level pieces where you would scale up to the nth level. Meraki does, let's be fair, Meraki does have a stopping point, but it does fit extremely well into the enterprise. There's definitely a position there, right? I think we can agree on that you would not put that into a 50,000 station core switching environment. That's not what Meraki is designed for. However, it has the beautiful part, and this is the point of what we're talking about today. It has a beautiful cloud management interface, and I would agree, second to none.
Right. And Cisco would agree with that as well. Then all their literature and slides that say we're number one in networking, a la enterprise, and number one in cloud networking, a la Meraki. And now that it's been one company for quite a while now, I think they're really starting to value both companies together, and I think that's kind of where we're going to delve into that a little bit further, is how we're seeing the best of both worlds, since really is when you're buying Meraki, you are buying a Cisco solution. It's just they're keeping the branding separate for now.
Okay, so let's talk about the key points today. So in the past, it was you had Cisco or you had Meraki, but never the twain shall meet. Like you would manage one, you would manage the other. Cisco actually has their own cloud management solution. I believe it's what DNA. It's their whole forget what it's called off the top of my head, but it's basically it's
DNA Center and or Catalyst Center,
Catalyst,
if you want to go the most recent naming
depending on how you're going to go about it. But yes, but they do have their own solution, but never the twain shall meet. So now we're talking about something that's fairly recent, which is being able to do one of the more powerful switch lines, one of the more common switch lines where there's overlap in the Cisco line and the Meraki line. So we're talking about the 9X00 line, the 9300s, which is what I call the belly button switch. Everybody's got one. Let's talk about that. Chris, I'm going to pick on you for a second. Talk about the history of what we had. We had something to fit 9300s, but now we've taken it to the next level, right? Cisco's taken it to the next level. Can you talk briefly about that?
Yep, absolutely. As Cisco continues to emphasize a one platform approach, they're pulling some of the greater Cisco offerings and allowing them to go active in the Meraki dashboard. So what we're seeing now is hardware, that being the Catalyst 9300 as well as the Catalyst 93M series. Essentially, they're the same inherently. But we've basically evolved the Catalyst line to support that 0-day, zero-touch provisioning capability, allowing for our customers to fully configure those switches before they actually arrive. So it gives our customers that flexibility to operate in a traditional networking infrastructure if they want to manage those 9300s on-prem, but it also gives the opportunity to ship those 9300 switches in Meraki mode. So then you don't have to manually configure some of those interfaces that would go into the Catalyst switches. So again, just kind of plays into that cloud managed architecture and that one Cisco approach that we're emphasizing here internally every day.
Right. So those belly button switches, you've got the 9300s. You could, in theory, what you're mentioning, the zero touch aspect, but you could really run them in a Meraki mode. So you've got that power and flexibility in management. Correct? Am I hearing that correctly? So that's the big deal here. That's what we're talking about. And in the past, Daniel, I'm going to pick on you. We're going to go back and forth here a little bit. There was two modes of doing this, right? Or there was only one mode of what you could do something with the 9300s, but it wasn't what we're talking about today. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so when Cisco first started bringing these worlds together, the opportunity was what was known as Meraki monitor mode. And as the name says, you would find your Catalyst devices, and actually has opened up into multiple families of the Catalyst 9000. So your Catalyst 9200s, 9300s, 9500s, anything that was really a single rack unit pizza box switch, a la non-chassis, could be discovered in a Meraki dashboard without removing any of the local administration capabilities. So you still got to keep your Catalyst switch doing Catalyst switch things, manage it how you saw fit.
Your CLI.
You could your CLI, exactly correct. But if you were looking to unify them into a cohesive dashboard, you could use the Meraki Cloud platform to bring your Catalyst switches into it, a small script to insert into your switch config. And then you can bring that into the dashboard, and some of the powerful features you would get, and even we had that in our lab environment, was first and foremost like the topology tree, right? Meraki's got an auto building topology view of all the hardware in your environment. And with the monitoring mode from Meraki, you could now get into those switches, see the interfaces, see the traffic, improve your troubleshooting, see where things connected to. And we found a couple faults in port channeling, a couple VLANs that might have been overlooked if you weren't using something of a central dashboard to bring that information to light, or doing something a little more manual. So that was first wave, right? So they said, oh, we got some switches. Meraki's got some switches. We can use our non-chassis devices in a monitoring mode. And, use that for best of both worlds.
Mm.
CLI for management, Meraki for monitoring, and one thing I like to bring up is how you can leverage that partnership through the requirement of your DNA subscription. One thing that people found when they bought a Catalyst 9000 series switch is they were required, and still are required, to purchase a DNA subscription. And for better or worse, people are saying, well, I have this subscription that I'm not really sure what to do with, right? I'm not big enough to maybe deploy the DNA Center platform. I'm not an enterprise size, but I had to buy this thing for 3 years. So as a sales mechanism, as a means of recurring revenue, we can say, hey, let's apply that license that you had to purchase with your Catalyst switch and adopt that into at least the monitoring mode into Meraki. So you can take advantage of using that license, coupling with the dashboard, and as long as that subscription stays active, that monitor mode capability would stay active as well.
So you're not losing that. You're losing that money. You're not just paying the money for no reason. You've actually got functionality that comes along with that license.
Correct. Ideally, that was first wave of conversation. So we still drive that home, and people can start seeing some value of that requirement. Yes.
Sure. So, so let's ask this question, and I'm going to get just both of you. Feel free to talk amongst yourself. But
Sure.
where do you see any inherent problems? So we talked about monitoring, and now we're talking about management. I'm sure there are limitations. You don't get something for nothing, is the saying. What would you both consider the limitations of this new functions, this new ability?
Yeah, I'll hop in there first. So the discussion I just had on monitoring, I think that's kind of in my opinion, kind of best of both worlds, right? For a lot of customers, if you bought a Catalyst switch, you want to get the features of the Catalyst switch out of it, right? You're buying it maybe for those highly configurable, more enterprise-esque capabilities. When you're looking at moving it into a management mode, essentially you're stripping off the Cisco operating system, right? The iOS XE platform. You're saying, I want to, delete that, and now I'm going to import a Meraki operating system. In doing so, you then are at the whims of what Meraki has available for their platforms. And when you look at some of those differences, and maybe we'll go a little technical in some of the terms here, you start seeing, okay, I had a Catalyst switch. Sorry, you were going to jump in there real quick.
I was just going to jump in and say, can you give me like one popular example?
Yeah, two. I'll give you two. There's the dynamic routing capability, right, that a Catalyst switch can do. Meraki only gives you something called OSPF as their dynamic routing solution. Cisco Catalyst gives you more options to do that. BGP, MPLS, OSPF. Right, VXLANs, VRFs, you can do those things there. So in a pure networking standpoint, you got to take that into consideration, saying, do I use those features today? If you treat it like an access switch, maybe not, and that can be a good reason to kind of jump into Meraki mode. The other one that I like personally is the application hosting. So I can actually run applications on my Catalyst switches as if it was like a mini computer, mini server, if you will. Thousand Eyes is a small application I run in my lab on a Catalyst switch because the application hosting feature allowed me to use CPU and memory in the commands of that switch.
It's based x86 architecture, is
exactly correct? Yep. So small footprint applications, without having to spin up like a separate Raspberry Pi or even a VM, you can launch right into a container on the switch. I think it's a very cool feature, very handy for small environments, trying to load some things into a hefty platform. Meraki mode today doesn't have that capability, right? So it's something you would effectively kind of neuter from the switch in its current format when putting it into a management mode into Meraki.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it more eloquently than Dan. What I will add is just for our Catalyst customers, there could be a learning curve, just understanding which licenses and how to best manage that based on your needs, right? It's just changing, it's evolving, and to ensure that you're fully equipped, there's a learning process involved, right? Sure. So Dan nailed on everything that I would have otherwise, but I think a learning curve is something that we have to take into consideration.
Sure, absolutely. So, okay, in that vein, then I'm sensing a positioning, right? And Chris, to your title, even, you're working in the Meraki, but your title is in the SMB space, And that tells me, and really, this is personal opinion, mind you, but I think that Meraki tends to scale excellently in the SMB space, the smaller markets, and it could even serve as, when you're in your upper end switches, as a core switch for an SMB type, small business type environment. And small business means different things to different people. In my opinion, it's 500 users and below, certain size revenue and all that. But it can actually go up to like 3,000 users. It just depends on how you architect it. Would you guys agree with that? It's fairly
100%.
straightforward.
Very
couldn't
flexible.
agree more.
But
Loosely
you could use the upper end switches as core, and then you've got distribution and your access switches and what have you. Is that a fair assessment in terms of, like, if you were to, what I mean by that is, again, the topic being adding this management function and the ability to use the 9300s, because the 9300s, they are not, as Daniel, you alluded to earlier, the 9300s really are the entry point for a lot of the Cisco switching. We can get into the core switching, which is your blade modules and all the other pieces, where you're really going up there in terms of its functionality. You know, you've got the built-in routing, the actual application servers built into a chassis and everything else. So we're going up from there, right? So I want to make that point and drive it home personally, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, this is, for everybody. Well, it's got to have its place, right? Would you agree with that? Would you disagree with me on this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's mostly ideal for customers who desire operational efficiency and flexibility with cloud operations. Of course, for customers that have no intent, being able to manage on-prem is great as well if they tend to use the cloud. But we touched upon a few things earlier. Simplicity was a word that came out from both you and Dan, David. Graphic user interface, the Meraki dashboard is easy to use, common language. You don't need to be a technical expert. In fact, I'm not. I've only been with the org for a year and a half. I have a logistics background, and I can quickly and easily configure, manage, deploy my home network in just a few buttons, right? So understanding that some of the small business customers don't have the resources that we're seeing at the enterprise level, this switch is a perfect in-between for maybe you love the Catalyst line, but you need that functionality, the efficiency and flexibility to be able to manage the cloud. So
excellent.
Yeah, I think it's also about how are you using that switch, right? One of the questions I ask any customer I'm talking to is, who's managing your network today? Understand a little bit more about their engineering staff, and then how are they managing it today? And how would you manage it in a perfect world, right? Learning about how they use their environment, what they need out of it, is a big telling point, especially to start looking at categorizing it as an SMB, right? You might have the value of a, dare I say, over-engineered Catalyst switch for features that they're just not going to take advantage of.
That never happens. Come on. That never happens.
But you look at it as the way of future-proofing in two different camps, right? So the flexibility of the conversion process of a Catalyst switch into Meraki OS, you can do. It's in full public beta mode right now on your own hardware, right? So you made that investment. You can move it to Meraki on your own design, and even you can move it back to Catalyst if you so chose. If you are operating like an MSP, and that's something you want to do, that's an easy way to say, hey, I inherited a company and I'm going to take over their Catalyst environment. Maybe I don't have the skills and tools to do that, but if I found that they only needed the capabilities for what Meraki's dashboard allows you to, maybe I can convert them over to that OS and make my management platform a little easier.
Sure.
Inversely, you can go the other way, right? So maybe you had these Catalyst infrastructure pieces and said, hey, maybe I got acquired by a big company and I need to be acclimating into those environments, and they want to use DNA Center because that's coming into more opportunities as well. From once only an appliance, now they have a AWS instance, now they also have a VMware instance. So the Catalyst Center or DNA Center, it might be more applicable than it once was, right? A little more obtainable to deploy those instances. And maybe I can see those Cisco hardware pieces maybe moving in that direction. Key word out of that would be flexibility, right? You're not going to be just directed into this hardware can only talk to this dashboard, which kind of exists right now if you buy a Meraki piece of switch, like an MS 350, for example, right? That's a Meraki only deployment, and it only will be that way. Now we can say, all right, let's put some Catalyst in there. We can be a little more flexible, and the 9300s that are going to be coming down the road a little bit. I think Chris mentioned about the future launch of a Catalyst M series, that pre-OS config solution. Now you're going to start expanding the Meraki switching portfolio into products and features that maybe just weren't there in the current version, like more MGig ports, more PoE scalability, more stacking capability, more modularity of the uplinks. Right, Meraki's not churning those products.
That's one of the things I've always wanted in Meraki, is being able to have
uplinks,
modular uplinks. So I have to ask two things. I have to interrupt here and say, for those of you that are watching live, please, again, feel free to chat us your questions. We got Daniel and Chris here, and they're both experts on this topic. So please, we've got the time now. Now is the time, and here is the place. So please feel free to chat us the questions. So Chris, is this technology looking? Do we have any? Is this going to replace any, or maybe replace isn't quite the right word, but maybe I'm going to use replace. Is this going to replace any part in the Meraki line? Is it going to any switch, anything in the Meraki line, or will it render it ineffectual? Maybe I think you know where I'm going with this. Like, if I take a 9300, make it a Meraki piece, is there any switch in the Meraki line that this goes, okay, we really, instead of getting this Meraki switch, I'm going to use my Catalyst and throw it in there?
So I will say, we're making active investments still in our Meraki MS series. It's not immediately going to replace those switches. Now, again, going back to the piece that I had alluded to earlier, is we're moving very much to a one Cisco approach, where we're integrating onto one platform, whether it's the Meraki platform, DNA Spaces, which Dan has alluded to a few times. So within that context, I wouldn't be surprised if 5-10 years from now we see cannibalization of the Meraki product line. There's no active conversations of that today, and we are still actively making investments in the Meraki MS product line. So,
okay. So if I may, I'm talking a lot, but I'm just going to say, if I can visualize, I'm seeing that in the past, I don't know, call it 10, 15 years, but even more so, it's just ramping up, that even hardware vendors, software vendors for sure, but even hardware vendors are making all of their products cloud enabled, cloud managed, and everything else. And also then within the Cisco product line, there's a convergence, right? And this is a part of an announcement. We can also talk about the Wi-Fi access point. The Wi-Fi parts have the same thing going on. It's been going on for slightly longer. And I foresee, I'm just going to put it out there, I may be completely wrong, but I foresee a time where you have essentially one line and you can choose your management infrastructure with conditions, where it's like, okay, if you're an SMB, pick this license. And I think they have DNA Essentials, DNA Advanced, and there's Enterprise, DNA Enterprise.
Oh, that's the two. They're really moving just to a two license, Enterprise and Advantage.
They are, okay.
They're trying to get closer to that.
Okay, so let's say the DNA Essentials now is just called Meraki. I'm just going to throw that out there that it might be. I don't know that. Honestly, this is conjecture on my point. Nobody from Cisco or Meraki has told me anything of any kind. And Chris, you actually just said it, but there's been no discussions on that. But I don't know. With all that cloud type management, it would be a waste to not merge the two into that.
I think Chris. I think Chris had the good point in that, and the piece was timing, right? He said 5 to 10 years, right? This won't be a overnight change. So I think people expect that, right? We've been looking at this, crystal ball for a little bit. I mean, the MS390 came out. That's it's a catalyst to Meraki clothing. What are you doing, Meraki and Cisco? Help us down this learning curve. And now we're just starting to see this churn up a little bit faster. But years, I think we have to understand this is not going to be a overnight change of structure, and that gives us the appreciation for the magnitude this is going to have to the industry.
Yeah, no, for sure. I get it.
And we've talked, I've alluded to One Cisco a few times now, just to add some additional context to those points. I know we're talking switches today, but if we look at our MX platform, we saw AnyConnect, Duo, all these.
Yeah, I remember that.
Last year, you guys are talking Catalyst wireless access points, given the ability to fully manage and configure your access points both on-prem and through the cloud. And now we're finally seeing that with our switches. Dan had alluded to the 390 series, which previously you could monitor through the cloud, but now these Catalyst 9300 Meraki's full management through the cloud as well.
By the way, any connect on an MX changed my mind.
They got there finally.
What, as opposed to doing, is it L2TP?
Yep.
Like, no, that any connect was like,
they got there.
Call it what it is. Yeah, they got there. So we're coming up on kind of the end of our time together. Which, oh man, I love talking about infrastructure stuff and actual hardware because it makes my little geek heart go pitter patter. I just love it. But let's kind of bring it up on a high note here. What do you see overall as the future? What do you see? What is if you talked about the crystal ball, let's kind of bring that to a close. What do you see if you were to take a guess? What do you think the future is going to hold for this type of technology?
If it was me in this process, I would see we're marching towards more of a white box or white label solution where you have one piece of hardware. It's easier on Cisco manufacturing to go with one box, dual OSs, and maybe or maybe not Meraki lives or doesn't live on to maybe they just jump all in on the Catalyst bandwagon, right? Everything from Cisco right now is Catalyst switching, Catalyst wireless, Catalyst routing, maybe Catalyst Center and Catalyst Cloud. Going that direction might be what happens on that front, and it unifies and signals to everybody that this is one ideology to rule them all. So that's where I think it's going. Again, I don't have any inside information. I am not with Cisco, but that's where I would put my focus into because it really makes it easy on the customers to know that I'm buying into one solution set with the flexibility to go best of breed hardware, best of breed licenses, and then like I said before, recurring revenue. Cisco is and wants to continue to be driven as a software company. So if we can make good on those DNA or Catalyst licenses, we can ride the momentum of what Meraki's already doing with their licensing structure and moving to more subscription-based focuses. That's just going to make it easy for partners to consume and renew, and that just makes it better for everyone in the industry to keep those products as a dollar generator.
Absolutely. Chris, how about you? And I'm going to preface it by saying these are the opinions of Chris Horvath, not of Cisco or any affiliated companies of Cisco.
Yeah. I mean, Dan nailed it. And again, it's I think taking the Catalyst brand, putting it on one platform. Right now, it looks like that would be the Meraki platform, and just kind of marrying the two brands into one, representing everything under the Cisco brand. Again, I don't know timelines, things like that, but we've already heard some buzzwords like networking experiences. That's a buzzword that gets thrown around that I think will eventually be consolidated into one sales motion, bringing all of those architectures that I alluded to earlier on a single platform.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I think, and I kind of alluded to that earlier with my opinion, that unified experience, that you hear the word all the time of single pane of glass. By the way, I hate that term because the problem is so many single panes of glass, you got to look through a bunch of windows, right? Nonetheless, but we are getting to points where a lot of the pieces are more easily accessible. I've been doing this for a while. I posted something to LinkedIn the other day that says, you've been doing networking for a while, and then I posted a picture of NetWare with floppy disks. So that, and then Token Ring and some other archaic networking technologies. So we've come from that to now you plug all your cables into the switch, doesn't matter what, and you just configure them via software that isn't even in your office. So, we've come a long way. So, all right. I appreciate your time, both of you. And with that, I wanted to say to everyone that is watching, if you want to get more information, feel free to go out to our website at www.netcenter.net, or you can email us at info@netcenter.net. You can also reach us at any of our social media sites. And if you happen to be watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that you're notified when we do go live, which we do every 2 weeks at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. Also, one last reminder, we are holding our annual technology conference called Envision. We're holding it on Thursday, November 9th. It is free to attend, free to register. You can go to netcenter.net/nvision. You should be seeing it up on your screen with the URL, so please attend. We have a lot of vendors, a lot of speakers, breakout sessions, several keynotes, talking a lot about AI this year, a lot about infrastructure, cloud networking. It's going to be very informative. So I highly recommend that you attend. With that, I want to turn back to Chris and Daniel. This has been fun. I really appreciate you guys coming out and talking about this, and I look forward to working more with the new Meraki feature with the 9300s, and what kind of what we see if our predictions come true. See what happens in the next let's say 5 years. What's going to happen in the next 5 years?
There you go. I love talking.
Yep,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
And with that, everyone, thanks for joining us today on NCI Live.